Well, thank you for allowing me to be here. I just appreciate Dr. Smith and our work together at the Trojan Church. It's one of the three churches that I pastor, and one of the churches that we started is just want you to know that we have a Afrocentric worship service on campus at USC, and it is now the official USC Christian ministry that they sponsor, and we have an official partnership with them. Victor has been there, preached, and the students love him, and they want to make sure he's back, but they love Najuma and what she brings and all the energy, and I can tell you, I don't quite preach that way. I guess that's my problem, is that I'm too much of a stiff Asian Presbyterian minister, and it's just occupational hazard of mine. I just can't get that excited, I don't know. And I grew up in Midwest and lived in Minnesota, so I'm a part of the frozen chosen, so can't get too excited. Let me just give you just a couple of things real quick before I go too much into what Najuma talked about, what I was planning on, because I want to give you another model to compare to Victor's. Because what the Victor's church has done is they use a tax credit. That means the church doesn't take the risk. It just simply makes the land available. Developer then gets the money from the state for the land acquisition, and the church works out a deal with them as how much they get and how the money can flow, in what manner it comes, and so on. But church doesn't take any risk because it uses land or the areas of the church that it doesn't affect its ministry. So unused land is a typical phrase that was used initially with SB4 because I was part of the Presbyterian delegation that was trying to get the SB4 passed as well. The history with my congregation is we used to be about 2 blocks over. There's now a big theater at the USC campus that used to be my church building. But due to deferred maintenance issues, church had no choice but to sell and move off campus because it no longer could maintain the building that was built at the time of Great Depression. And we thought there was about $2 million of deferred maintenance that was there. It ended up there was about $10 million worth of deferred maintenance. And church just simply couldn't do anything with it. So if USC was always interested in the building, so before me, they sold the building to USC, and they purchased a abandoned storefront about 10 blocks north of campus, over in 23rd and Union, which is about 23rd and Hoover. So then, but church didn't know what to do with the land, so that's when I was asked to come and guide them with the new vision of where to go. Church's original mission statement was long and lengthy and all the spiritual language about, saving people and, the giving, doing all the right things and, improving community, but nobody knew what it was. So we just simply made that mission statement very simple, that we are the agents of hope in our community. So that's all we wanted to do was, and our spiritual element comes in the use of the word hope, but then the emphasis is not on the congregation, but on members. So that's why we are to be agents. And then our focus is on the community. So we are the agents of hope in our community. That's simply what our mission is. And so when we were moving out, and in 2019, I was charged to move the congregation off the property and onto a new place and rebuild and relocate the church. So before we did that, I simply spent my time out on the street with a pad of paper and stopped every person that was walking by and said, I'm your new pastor because we're going to put a church here and you don't know it, but you're my church member, so what do you want from your church? People just told me 3 things that they wanted from the church. They said, will you have a food pantry? I said, we can look into that. And they said, will you open your church building so the community center can be created so people can have birthday parties and quinceañeras? We said, okay, we can look at that. And Thursday, can you do low-income housing? Because rent's going up. And so we said, we'll look into that. And so that's when we started. And we had initially envisioned creating Hope and Union, that we just go by the name. Even the official name is United University Church. We do our ministry in the community as Hope and Union because we're on Union Avenue. And so we are Hope and Union Community Development Corporation was envisioned, and we were waiting to form that. Now, in order to do that, you have to have a certain amount of resources. You can have great ideas, but if you can't figure out how to come up with the money for it, it's not that easy to make them happen. So we then started venturing into looking at how to use our property to generate new income for the congregation to do the work. We bought the properties that's there. So it's not like Victor's Church, where church has been there for 90 years, which has been paid off for years and years ago, and it has a sanctuary that church members have come to love and have value, and they'd rather be buried there, than anywhere else, type of a thing. My congregation was in a storefront which had no connection to whatsoever. So rather than trying to turn a storefront, abandoned storefront, into a fancy-looking church building, which we didn't really have that much money to do properly, decision was made to turn that property into income-generating property, and that only on Sunday morning we will use portion of the property for the church worship service. So rather than primary use of a facility being a worship service and sitting empty rest of the week, and then trying to figure out how to use a space for other means and mainly for educational purposes, right? You rent to school or have a run children's program of some sort, and that's what most churches do if you have those properties. What we decided to do was we will do other things first, and so that it could be used 40 to 100 hours a week on something else, and only 1 hour on Sunday morning for use for church worship service. Because pandemic showed us that we can do a worship service out in the parking lot. We didn't need a building. That's right. And people came to really focus on being a community rather than all the trappings of a worship space. So rather than getting people enamored with the facility and the building, we just simply concentrated on the community so that we can get rid of the building. And so now we started looking at partnering with businesses to run adult daycare center, or even partner with a business to run a restaurant and just use it on Sunday morning, and all these other things. We went through about 7 different iterations, and all of them fell apart one reason or another. We've been at this now for 7 years. And we then eventually connected with a developer of modular housing. And by someone who knows how to do the modular housing, we were able to create a margin in building, because currently the per unit cost, Victor mentioned, what is it, 45 million? For 60 units. We are right now looking at putting 250 units for only 35 million. We went from $850,000 per door cost down to $250,000 per door, because we found the right developer who was willing to do that. The developer is also willing to work as a fee developer. What that means is, I as a church take all of the risk. And so we are the ones who get the loan, not the developer, but they will also leverage their own expertise in history so that we can get the loan, and they will get paid, and they will get paid handsomely. They'll make their money. They know their business. So I don't have to worry about them making their money because they take care of themselves. But we are able to build this, and if everything goes, and Vector got to show me how to get the approval from Methodist side, because I got the Presbyterian. My church belongs to both Presbyterian Church and Methodist, and I got the Presbyterian side figured out, but Methodist, I'm still waiting for that approval. And we've now our approval process through the denominations is now in its 3rd year. And people have a lot of questions because it's risk, because we are talking about putting 250 units for $35 million, and church is going to be taking a $35 million loan, and people are worried about that. And they're wondering why I'm not so worried, because what we are able to create with the current developer is that the loan cost is only 50% of the gross income, and operational expenses is 25%. And so that gives us a plenty margin, so that for church to operate and do number of different activities as we're talking about, doing the ministry. So what we are looking at is question of how to become agent of hope in our community, and not just the housing, but using the profit from the housing to make difference. And the social enterprise is what we're looking at right now. And because we're talking about building a 7-story building to low-income housing and student housing, because where we are located, there's a 50% low-income community, 50% students, so we're meeting both sides of them. And then we are creating about 7,000 square feet of community gathering space / church, and doing other kind of activities that can be the income generating as well. But we're looking at job creation, and we are talking with the various potential partners, see what could be there. But one of the options we're looking at is creating cafe space and doing that kind of work to, creating jobs for people in the community. And the advantage in that what we are doing with low-income housing allows us to create a social enterprise that can actually lose money. We don't have to make money, because the biggest reasons that why the social enterprises fail is because the goal too often is to generate a lot of income for the church. But social enterprise, if we try to create income, will never work, because kind of people you're trying to help and trying to do the work, your staff cost gets too high, because each person cannot generate what a experienced person who doesn't have the issues that we're trying to deal with. So we need a housing portion to create the kind of margin that we need to run the social enterprise. But often the churches don't know how to leverage their assets, because we don't evaluate what assets we have. Often churches will come up with a mission because pastor or somebody said, I think this would be a good idea. But then within the church, there isn't anybody or that doesn't know how to make that vision a reality. But rather being able to look at creating things that members know how to do. And so one of the things that I've always been able to help churches do is I worked for Presbyterian Church National Office called Self-Development of People. And what it does is it provides grant money to low-income community when people come together to work together. And local group here, we always struggle to find groups to give money to. Okay, you heard me right. Okay, I want you to know that. But we have some stringent requirements, but it's a group of people that have to work together. And then the people have to meet the low income, have to meet the certain standards of economics, and we can go into details of that. But some of the groups we have funded, for example, can be for economic purposes. And some could be just for doing good work in the community. But you can create jobs. Let me give you an example. In rural Nebraska, there was a problem that they were dealing with in that in the small town, there was no doctor. And so when elderly got sick, they had to figure out how to get to Lincoln. But that was 40 miles away. And the elderly who couldn't drive couldn't get to hospitals. And so I organized a group of people and a local church to create a taxi service. And they trusted a pastor to be the administrator. So we gave money to the group and to the church. And the church hired its members, young people who are looking for jobs, to drive people to their doctor's appointments. And and then so that there was a cost for the gas and the car that was paid, as well as the young people had jobs along the way. But also the community then became the center, where the church became the center of all of the community gathering, and the meetings were held, and that church grew because of that. In urban area in Detroit, I helped to create young people starting a t-shirt printing business through self-development of people. When young people came together, they were great artists. Instead of putting out graffiti, they were putting out on t-shirts. And we gave them money to do that. And there's nothing that says that young people, as long as young people ran it themselves, we could support them. And that there are ways to create these kind of economic opportunities. In rural West Virginia, we helped a group of women get training to start a medical record transcribing business. So when the community, you look at in the community and talk to people and see what assets they have and what your members are capable of doing and putting together, then you can generate ideas. But too often, the idea and the assets are just simply too separate. And they are, so the connection becomes extremely difficult. But when you find people who already are committed, it's easy, because too often we don't think of individuals and their experiences in business or their experiences in work as assets of the church. We don't teach people to think about their everyday life as their part of their assets. But if we can help people see that their work, whatever the work may be, the calling of God for them, rather than just something that they give to Caesar for a paycheck. But then that their own career, whatever that work may be, could be the asset. There was a church that I was talking with. The one of the members was a garbage collector. He was but then here's the thing: as he was going through a route, he met and he talked to people. And so he knew what was going on. He knew who was sick, and he knew who he had to go and get the trash can from behind the fence out into the front, because there was an older lady who needed the help along the way. But then what happens? It's the children find out about how this gentleman helps. And so then it ends up that when she passed away, the children made sure the church was left on the will, simply because, man, he did his work in the community. And so his knowledge of the community became an asset. Rather than simply looking at what he did as a work just for money, but then everything became the sense of calling, and then what he did became the asset, not only to him, but also to the church community, but community as a whole as well. But it's these kind of things that we need to look at the assets. And so we are looking at all the property that we have, as well as all of the assets within the community, in the church, and look at its asset and say, how can we use that to be the agent's hope in our community? And so, and we are now looking at, like I said, 250 units. And because it's a modular building, once we get the permission from the denominations to start, we will be able to finish everything in less than 2 years. The building itself of the property is only going to be about 8 months, because it's a modular building, it's much quicker. So anyway, but I just wanted to give you another model, but it takes a higher risk for the church, but there is greater return as well. And so, thank you.